The day I saw Natalie Blake again, I watched a guy get tossed out of her mansion like yesterday's trash, looking red-faced and defeated. People around me didn't even blink, just shook their heads and muttered the same thing, another fake. President Blake still looking for her ex-husband from back when she was blind. I kept my face blank, but inside, it felt like a wrecking ball had hit me. My eyes dropped to the pavement, and I said the only thing that wouldn't give me away, oh. It wasn't long before it was my turn to step inside. Natalie stood there, her gaze pinning me like a butterfly in a glass case. "You from Seaview Bay too?" she asked. "Same town as him. Your name's even kinda similar. Do you know my ex-husband?" My throat tightened, but I shook my head. "Nope. Never met him." Lie. A clean, practiced lie. I'd been telling it for 2 years now, ever since we split. I didn't expect fate to throw us into the same room again, this time with me as her psychological counselor, which was laughable considering I was the exact man she couldn't stop obsessing over. Back then, she was blind, stubborn, and full of fire. Now she was sharp-eyed and even more impossible to approach. Right before I entered her house, I saw another guy shoved out the front door, a vase almost flying after him. Her assistant calm as ever explained in a hushed voice, "Don't mind it. Happens every couple weeks. She's obsessed with finding that Guerre mystery husband from the Seaview days. None of them are him, obviously. Just gold diggers with decent lies." I didn't say anything. What could I say? That she already found him and fired him 5 minutes ago? I followed the assistant silently through the sprawling mansion. The place was cold, expensive, and empty. "Mr. Blake has a bad temper," the assistant whispered like it was some state secret. "But if you can calm her down, the pay's great. Your job? Get her to stop chasing ghosts and agree to marry Logan Carter, the guy her family's picked out." We stopped outside her master bedroom. He knocked gently, voice suddenly syrupy. "Ms. Blake, your new therapist's here. Please calm down and talk things out before throwing another lamp." A sharp crash answered. The assistant flinched. "All right then. Maybe not today." He turned to me. "Sorry, Dr. Reed. Looks like the door flew open." Natalie stood there, thin and pale, but her eyes cut through me like X-rays. "Fong Yuan," she said, and I almost choked. But then she squinted. "No, not quite. It's not even the same Yuan." The assistant quickly explained, fumbling. "His name's Ethan. Ethan Reed. Totally different." I held up my ID, praying she wouldn't look too hard. She scoffed. "Do they really think hiring someone with a similar name will convince me? Please." Her voice dropped into ice. "Dr. Reed, you're fired." I didn't argue. I was halfway out the door when my ID card slipped from my folder. She bent down before I could, picking it up. Her brows furrowed. "Seaview Bay. You're from Seaview?" My blood ran cold. I lived there for a bit," I stammered. "Coincidence?" She narrowed her eyes. "We lived there 2 years ago, got married there." "You sure we've never met?" "Positive," I said, deadpan. She didn't push, but I knew her mind was spinning. 2 years ago, she washed up on the beach near Seaview Bay. I was the one who pulled her out of the waves, barely breathing. I was the one who warmed her, fed her, talked her through the blackness of her blindness. I was the one who tricked her into marrying me with no license, no certificate, just vows said in an old fishing shack because her ID had been lost in the shipwreck that also stole her sight. For 6 months, I was everything to her. The cook, the guide, the husband. We learned Braille together, laughed, even made love in that creaky old bed that felt like it would collapse any day. But we didn't make it to forever. She got found. Her rich family swept in like a hurricane, and she left. I stayed behind, thinking she'd come back once she could see again. But the one who came knocking on my door was Logan Carter. He looked at my rundown house like it was a landfill. She said she's never been in love, he told me smugly. Don't delude yourself. Then he tossed a few cruel facts in my face: her wealth, her engagement, her status, and told me to disappear. And I did. I changed my number. Changed my name. Became a ghost. And now, by some sick twist of fate, I was hired to help her let go of the man she didn't know was me. She still remembered everything. Still obsessed over him. Still tested every guy who showed up, hoping to find the one who used to help her read Braille and chase the sunrise. It would have been touching if it wasn't so damn tragic. And me? I kept playing the part, sitting across from her every day in therapy sessions, pretending I didn't recognize her scent, her voice, her quiet stares that burned a little longer each time. Then came the day that changed everything. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "It's been 3 years." I blinked. What has? Since my husband pulled me out of the ocean. I tried to stay neutral, but she pressed on. He never gave me his real name. And we never got married legally. That's why I can't find him. I made the mistake of nodding slightly. You're right. No certificate makes it hard. Her eyes narrowed. How do you know that? My heart dropped. I scrambled for an excuse. Just a guess. If you had a marriage certificate, you'd have tracked him down already. It's logical. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You're clever. She started walking toward me, slow and calculated, forcing me back until I was trapped between her and the desk. Dar. Read, she murmured, voice soft and dangerous. Want to hear a secret? She leaned in close, breathing me in. After I got my sight back, I went to Seaview Bay to find my husband. I searched every record, every database. And guess what? There's no Fong Yuan. Not one. No one by that name ever lived there. My blood turned to ice. I gripped the table edge so tight my knuckles popped. What was I supposed to say? That I faked my ID to hide from her uncle? That my name had been changed so no one could trace me? Before I could answer, the door slammed open. Logan Carter barged in, face full of fake concern. What's going on here? He barked. I stepped away from Natalie instinctively. It's not what it looks like, I said. It's exactly what it looks like, Natalie snapped at the same time. I stared at her, shocked. What are you talking about? Logan smirked. You're messing with your patient. That's unethical as hell. I'll make sure your license is revoked. Natalie turned on him. You don't get to control my life. But we're engaged, he shouted. She laughed bitterly. You mean your family wants us to be engaged? I never said yes. Logan turned red. I've been patient. Loyal. I stuck by you when you were blind. You stuck around because you thought I was weak, Natalie said coldly. You thought I'd fall for you out of gratitude. But I never did. And I never will. Logan glanced at me with burning hatred. This guy isn't even from your world. You think he can give you what I can? He already gave me more than you ever will, she replied, voice shaking. And just like that, the illusion shattered. Logan stormed out, muttering threats. Natalie stood in the middle of the room, fists clenched, body trembling. Why won't you admit it's you, she whispered. Am I really that unworthy of the truth? I stared at her, emotions wrecking me from the inside. It's not that. It's complicated. Try me, she said, daring me to speak. And I knew this was the edge. The next step would burn every lie I built to the ground. I wanted to speak. God, I wanted to tell her everything right then and there, how I had waited, how I had mourned the silence after she left, how I thought she had moved on and didn't need a blind girl's beachside mistake anymore. But the words caught somewhere in my chest, thick and aching, and all I could manage was a pitiful half-truth. I had my reasons, I said, and immediately regretted it. Natalie's eyes hardened like glass under pressure. Reasons, she repeated, the word venomous. You mean lies? That's what they are, right? I said nothing, just lowered my eyes and tried to keep my breath steady. She stared at me for a long moment, then abruptly turned her back. Get out, she said, voice sharp and clipped. Don't come back tomorrow. Don't come back at all. But I did. Not because I was brave. Not because I had some grand plan. But because the contract still had my name on it, and her assistant who had been eavesdropping half the day from behind the grand piano pulled me aside as soon as I tried to leave. That could have gone worse, he said with a nervous laugh. Could have been a wine glass this time. I didn't respond. I was still hearing her voice telling me to get out on loop in my head. He looked around to make sure no one was listening. Why didn't you just say you didn't know her, he whispered. Lie better. Say Fong Yuan's dead or something. I looked at him, dead in the eyes, and said nothing. Because deep down, I didn't want to erase myself from her story. And then fate threw another curveball. Mr. Richard Blake arrived that same afternoon, her infamous uncle, though anyone with half a brain could tell there was more to the story. I watched him stride through the hall like he owned it, charming and composed, the kind of man who made people instinctively move out of the way. Natalie's expression when she saw him was a mixture of resignation and formality. Uncle Rick, she said flatly. It's been a while. You're looking better, he said, glancing briefly at me before pretending I didn't exist. Eyes fully healed. Enough to see through people, she replied. I wanted to roll my eyes, but I stayed quiet. I had no idea then just how much this man would come to matter in the unraveling of everything. He smiled at her, all warmth and care, then turned to me and extended a hand. You must be the new therapist, he said smoothly. Dar. Reed, is it? Heard quite a bit about you. I smiled politely and nodded, but internally, every muscle in my body was wired to snap. I had seen this man before in a photo, sent to me years ago by someone I once called Sister. Sarah Jennings. My mentor. My only family. She had loved Richard Blake. Thought she'd finally found someone worth giving her heart to. And not long after, she was dead. Found floating in a river, ruled a suicide. But I never believed that. Not for a damn second. That day, everything clicked. I finally understood why the grief hadn't let go of me all these years. Why the pain had morphed into something darker, colder. I looked at Richard Blake and saw the man who had stolen light from the only person who ever saved me. And now here he was, smiling in my face, calling me doctor. I clenched my fists so tight behind my back that my nails left half-moons in my palms. I stayed quiet, played the part. But I was boiling inside. Natalie watched us interact with a slight frown. Later, when Richard left, she turned to me. You were awfully polite, she said. Almost friendly. I didn't know you were a fan of his. I'm not, I muttered, too fast. You said you read all his books, she replied, narrowing her eyes. Damn. I'd forgotten that part of the act. College days, I mumbled. Doesn't mean I still follow him. He's a fraud, she said, surprising me. Pretends to care. Doesn't. But he's family, so I have to tolerate him. I stayed silent, but my chest felt like it was being crushed. Natalie didn't stop there. She leaned closer, curious now. Why do you hate him so much? You've got that look. The one people wear when they're hiding a body in the trunk. I looked away. You don't want to know. Try me. I didn't say it. Not yet. Because the rage wasn't ready to be poured out. Not until I had proof. Not until I could take him down without risking her, or blowing my own cover. So I deflected. I shrugged and said, writers always think they're smarter than everyone else. She smirked. Fair. But then she caught me off guard again. You said something last week, she murmured. About Braille. Said I learned it fast. I froze. Did I? Yeah, she said, voice low. Weird thing to know. I never told anyone how long it took me. My brain scrambled. Hypnosis, I said suddenly. You mentioned it during a deep session. That's how I knew. Natalie nodded slowly, like she was weighing the lie. Makes sense, she finally said. Still strange, though. That night, she walked me to the door and stared at my back for a long time as I left. Something in her had shifted. She wasn't angry anymore. She was hunting. And I knew sooner or later, she'd figure it out. But not before someone else showed up first. A few days later, a stranger came to the villa. He was from Seaview Bay. Said he had news about Natalie's ex-husband. My heart thudded in my chest as I heard voices drifting from the tea room. You're sure he's still in this city? Natalie asked. Absolutely. I've seen him. I swear. I tried to walk past unnoticed, but the man saw me. He shot up from his seat and pointed. That's him. Isn't that the guy? You're mistaken, I said immediately. No, I'm not, he shouted. You used to come to my veggie shop. Always bought okra. Said your wife loved it. Natalie slowly turned to me. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't speak. Defending myself would only make it worse. She dismissed the man politely, handed him a reward, then shut the door. Silence stretched thick and heavy. Then she asked softly, so should I congratulate you for hiding this well or praise myself for figuring it out? I swallowed hard. I'd vote for the second. Her laugh was wet and broken. Do you have any idea what it's been like for me these past 3 years? I started to speak, but she didn't let me. She stepped toward me and pushed me onto the small couch in the tea room, her hands rough, trembling. She tore open my shirt buttons flying but didn't go further. Instead, her shoulders slumped and tears wet the fabric beneath her face. Why? She whispered. Why won't you recognize me? Do you hate me that much? It's not about hate, I said hoarsely. It's about difference. You're the president of Blake Enterprises. I'm a guy who used a dead friend's address to fake a new identity. So what? She cried. So you don't have money. I'll give it to you. You don't have family. I'll be your family. What am I to you, Ethan? A dog you raised and dumped? No, I choked out. You were everything. I was just scared you'd see me and regret it all. Her hands gripped my chin tight. Did I regret it? She asked. When we shared food in that tiny shack. When we laughed until sunrise. You think any of that was fake? I shook my head. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Can you forgive me? She didn't answer. Not with words. She kissed me. Fiercely. Hungrily. And everything unraveled from there. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was love. But I let her pull me back into a place I thought I'd locked away for good. Later, we laid tangled on the small couch, the air heavy with silence. She curled into me and whispered, "Let's get a new marriage certificate tomorrow." I froze. Can we wait? For what? She asked, half asleep. Richard Blake invited me to his house tomorrow, I said. Her body tensed instantly. Why are you going there? Didn't I tell you to stay away from him unless it's absolutely necessary? I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because that house, his house, was the same place Sarah had gone before she died. And I wasn't going there to sip wine and talk literature. I was going there for her. And the fruit knife in my bag knew it. I didn't sleep that night, not really. I laid next to Natalie, listening to the rhythm of her breath, her hair brushing my bare shoulder, her legs tangled with mine like nothing had changed, like 3 years of silence and pretending had never happened. But I knew the truth. I had lied to her. Again. Not just by hiding my identity, but by staying quiet about why I really came back. Because tomorrow, at Richard Blake's house, I wasn't just going as the friendly therapist or the long-lost husband who accidentally re-entered her life. I was going as someone who had sworn to avenge Sarah Jennings, my sister, in everything but blood, the woman who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, the woman who once made me hot soup with her bare hands and told me to never settle for the life I was born into. She was the reason I'd even made it to college, to Ocean View, to Natalie. And she was the reason I had a key in my pocket and a blade under my jacket. The next morning, Natalie was already dressed when I woke up. Her face was unreadable, lips tight, posture tense. I'm going to the office, she said coolly, not even looking at me. Don't forget what I said. Don't go to Richard's place. I gave her a crooked smile, one I hoped looked casual. Sure thing. She stared at me for a second longer, like she was waiting for a real answer, then turned and left without kissing me goodbye. I waited 15 minutes, then grabbed the small folding knife I'd been keeping hidden and slipped it into my inner coat pocket. It wasn't anything flashy, just sharp enough, fast enough, quiet enough. I'd practiced the angle, the depth, the force. I didn't need to kill him with rage. I needed precision. But as I made it to the window, something stopped me. Taped to the inside frame was a handwritten letter. My name was on the front, Ethan. I froze. The handwriting was delicate but fierce, slanted like it had been written with emotion instead of calm. I peeled it off and opened it. Her words were etched deeply, like each one had cost her something to write. If you're reading this, you're already thinking of going. I won't stop you. I can't. But know this: I waited 3 years for you. If I lose you now to revenge, I don't know if I'll survive it. Please don't make me do this alone again. At the bottom, her name, Natalie. I folded the paper back up with trembling fingers and stared at the floor for a full minute, my pulse hammering in my ears. I had never expected her to care that much. Not like that. But it didn't change what I had to do. If I didn't confront Richard Blake, no one would. And if Natalie ever found out what really happened to Sarah from someone else, it would destroy her. I climbed out the window anyway. The trip across Ocean View felt surreal: cars honking, sunlight glinting off glass buildings, strangers scrolling on their phones like the world wasn't teetering on a moment I couldn't rewind. When I arrived at Richard's mansion, it was already buzzing with guests. Apparently, he was throwing one of his famous private parties, just the type Sarah had once described in her messages. I didn't go through the front door. I circled the perimeter and found a side entrance used by caterers. Security was tight, but money talks. $100 bill and a desperate-sounding "I forgot my badge" was enough to get me in. Inside, I mingled like a ghost. No one noticed the guy in a gray blazer and forgettable haircut. I moved through the crowd like smoke until I spotted him, Richard Blake, laughing, holding a glass of red wine, surrounded by sycophants. My hand twitched toward my coat pocket. I was just about to make my move when something stopped me. A hand. Small. Familiar. Warm. Natalie. Her fingers wrapped around my wrist with surprising force. Not here, she whispered through gritted teeth. Not like this. You followed me? I hissed. Of course I did, she snapped. You think I don't know what that knife is for? He killed her, I said, voice shaking. Sarah didn't jump. She was dumped. And I heard it. I heard him say it with my own ears. Natalie's expression didn't change. But her grip tightened. Then we do this smart, she said. You want revenge? Fine. But we're going to get it the right way. I already started investigating him months ago. And now, I've got enough to blow him wide open. I stared at her, stunned. You knew. Not everything, she admitted. But I knew something was wrong. And I knew he had something to do with my yacht accident, too. You think he tried to kill you? I don't think, she said. I know. I just didn't have the proof. Until now. She pulled me away from the main room and into a side hallway, shutting the door behind us. Listen, she said. 3 years ago, the day my yacht failed, Richard was the last person on it before I left. I only found out recently when we restored some deleted maintenance logs. And that's not all. Has been funneling company money into shell accounts, manipulating board votes, and grooming people like Logan Carter to distract me. So what do we do? I asked, suddenly feeling like I was the one being pulled along. We expose him, she said. I've already contacted the other victims. Sarah wasn't the only one. There are others, girls from his book clubs, parties, signing events. They've been too afraid to speak out. But they're ready now. You convinced them? No, she said. They found me. One girl said she saw your name on the clinic roster and thought maybe, just maybe, you were still fighting. I felt something in my chest crack. You talked to them? Not directly. But I helped set up a private Dropbox. They've been submitting evidence, voice recordings, texts, photos, everything. And I hired bodyguards for each of them. Richard won't lay a finger on them again. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I thought I was the one with the plan. The blade. The quiet rage. But Natalie, she had gone further than I ever could have imagined. Why? I asked. Why help me? After everything? She looked at me like I was an idiot. Because I love you, she said simply. And because I believe in justice more than revenge. That broke me. Right there. I dropped my head against the door, eyes burning. You really are too good for me. Probably, she said. But you're all I've got. So don't screw it up. That night, the post went live. The victims' stories were written out in clear, harrowing detail, accompanied by screenshots, files, and timelines. We didn't use names. But everyone knew. It exploded across the internet in under an hour. Hashtags, trending topics, journalists digging for more. Richard Blake's name was everywhere. And for the first time, not in praise. He tried to flee. But Natalie had already stolen his passport. By the time he realized it, federal agents were knocking on his door. The entire Blake family reeled from the fallout. Charles Blake, Natalie's father, handed over full control of Blake Enterprises to her in a closed-door board meeting. Richard was charged with multiple offenses. And me? I watched it all unfold beside Natalie, wondering how I ever thought I could do it alone. As the first snowfall of the season dusted Ocean View, Natalie and I stood in front of an old seaside house, the one Sarah once said would always be my home. She'd be proud of you, Natalie whispered. She was the reason I met you, I said. And you're the reason I didn't lose myself trying to avenge her. We stood there for a while, holding hands as the wind howled around us. Neither of us said it out loud, but I think we both knew this wasn't the end. Not yet. There was still more to uncover. It should have ended there, right? Richard Blake arrested, the truth exposed, Natalie taking control of Blake Enterprises like she was born for it, which, to be fair, she kind of was. I thought that was the final chapter. I thought justice had finally won. But if life has taught me anything, it's that closure is a myth. After the dust settled, after the headlines moved on, after Richard's smug face disappeared from every screen, there was still this hollow space between my ribs that refused to fill. Natalie noticed it too. Maybe that's why we started digging again. She became obsessed with the yacht incident, with tying up every loose thread, like if she didn't, Richard might somehow come back from the ashes and undo it all. And I couldn't stop thinking about Sarah. We never found proof that Richard killed her. There were no surveillance videos, no signed confessions, just a few muffled voice recordings and a lot of speculation. But Natalie had a theory, one that chilled me more than the winter wind off Seaview Bay. He couldn't have acted alone, she said one night, sitting cross-legged on her office floor, surrounded by boxes of old files and company memos. Someone had to help him. Someone who knew how to erase her identity from the hospital. Someone who made sure her autopsy pointed to suicide. A doctor? I asked. Or someone higher, she murmured. Someone who knows how the system works. Why would anyone protect him? Power, she said simply. Or fear. Maybe both. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring at the snow piling up on the edges of the rooftop, trying to breathe through the weight in my chest. I thought I'd finally laid Sarah to rest, but now I could feel her again just out of reach, asking for answers I still couldn't give. 2 days later, Natalie burst into my clinic like a storm. I found something, she said breathlessly. Remember the doctor who signed off on Sarah's death certificate? Yeah, Dr. Kern. He moved to Europe a year ago. But before he left, he deleted every case file he handled during that month. Except for one. She slapped a printout on the desk. I scanned it quickly. What am I looking at? A prescription log, she said. It's for a sedative, one strong enough to knock someone out cold for hours. It was filled under a different patient's name, but picked up with Sarah's insurance info. So he drugged her before he staged the suicide, yeah. I leaned back, heart hammering. That's enough to reopen the case, right? It should be, she said. But the system is still dragging its feet. No one wants to touch it now that Richard's already facing trial. They think we're kicking a dead dog. We're not, I said firmly. We're burying the one he already killed. That same week, Natalie did something no one expected. She held a press conference. Not about the company. Not about Richard. But about Sarah. She stood in front of a room packed with reporters and laid it all out: Sarah's story, the evidence, the cover-up, the pain it left behind. And then she did something even bolder. She said Sarah's full name. She said my connection to her. She made the entire world see that the man they'd once praised for his books and charity events had destroyed someone real. Someone human. She believed in him, Natalie said. And he betrayed that belief. It cost her her life. And it nearly cost the man she loved like a brother his sanity. We want the truth. Not just for her, but for every woman who was told to stay silent. The backlash was immediate. The Board of Medicine launched a formal review. Kern's passport was flagged. Prosecutors reopened the investigation. Suddenly, the case no one wanted to touch became a firestorm they couldn't ignore. Natalie came home that night, collapsed on the couch, and stared at the ceiling like she'd just walked out of a war zone. I sat beside her, took her hand, and kissed her knuckles. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, she whispered. You weren't just grieving Sarah. You were grieving justice. And I couldn't let you carry that alone anymore. I didn't respond. I just pulled her close and held her until the shaking in her shoulders stopped. After that, something shifted between us. Not in a bad way. In a raw way. We were no longer pretending things were fine. We'd been through fire together, and now, finally, we were learning how to heal. Slowly. Carefully. One morning, as we sat on the back porch drinking coffee, she looked at me and asked, "Do you think we would have made it back then? If none of this had happened?" Honestly? I said. Probably not. You would have gone back to your world. I would have stayed in mine. The beach would have been just a memory. But now, she asked. I reached across the table and touched her cheek. Now, I know what I'm fighting for. That weekend, we drove back to Seaview Bay. The weather was clear, the air salty and sharp. The old fishing village had changed, tourism had crept in, new shops, fancy hotels, but the heart of it was still the same. Natalie parked in front of the little house Sarah left for me, the one I'd never had the guts to fully claim. "Let's go in," she said. We stepped inside, and the scent of old wood and sea breeze hit me instantly. I looked around at the faded wallpaper, the dust dancing in the sunlight, the small table where Sarah used to write letters. Natalie moved quietly, her fingers tracing the frame of the window, the chipped ceramic bowl on the counter. She lived simply, she said. But with purpose. Yeah, I whispered. She gave me everything I have. Including me, Natalie added, turning to smile at me. Whether she meant to or not. We stayed there for hours. Talking. Laughing. Remembering. At one point, Natalie found a photo tucked behind a book on the shelf. It was me and Sarama, barely 15, holding a paper diploma, Sarah grinning proudly beside me. "You look so serious," Natalie said. I was terrified, I admitted. She told me to smile and I just froze. "She must have been proud of you." "She was," I said. "But I never told her enough." "Then tell her now," Natalie said. I looked at the photo, then out the window, where the ocean stretched endlessly. "Thank you, Sarah," I whispered. "For believing in me. For sending me here. For giving me Natalie. I won't waste any more time." That night, we stayed in Seaview. Just the two of us. No lies. No secrets. Just the sound of waves and the crackle of the old fireplace. As we laid tangled together under a thin blanket, Natalie turned to me and said, "Let's do it." "Do what?" I asked. "Let's get that marriage certificate." I blinked. "You serious?" "Completely. I've already waited 3 years. I don't want to wait anymore." I smiled. "You sure you want to be Mrs. Reed?" "I already am," she said. "Now I just want the paperwork to catch up." I kissed her, slow and deep, tasting salt and hope. "Then let's make it official." But even as I held her, even as we drifted into the safest sleep I'd had in years, I knew this wasn't the final chapter either. Because someone else had started asking questions about Richard's assets. About where the money went. About who else was involved. And if the rumors were true, the rabbit hole went deeper than any of us expected. We thought it was over, or at least winding down, the arrests, the press, the court dates looming like a distant thunderstorm, while Natalie and I finally caught our breath and tried to rebuild something that felt real. But reality has a nasty habit of creeping back in just when you start to relax. It started with a call. Not even a dramatic one, just a voicemail from a lawyer representing one of the Blake family's international accounts. Natalie played it on speaker without much thought, her hand wrapped around her morning coffee while I sat across the table scrolling headlines on my phone. "Miss Blake," the voice said, crisp and cautious, "I'm reaching out regarding the offshore entity linked to Richard Blake. We've reviewed the asset trail, and there are some irregularities. Funds were withdrawn under the name B. Jennings, we believe it may be a shell name or possibly someone acting under duress. Please return this call at your earliest convenience. My blood went cold. Jennings, I said slowly, setting my phone down. That's Sarah's last name. Natalie's eyes met mine, sharp with sudden alertness. There's no way that's a coincidence. He's dead to rights, Natalie. Why would Richard use her name? Maybe to hide money, she said. Maybe to manipulate someone else. Either way, we're not done. We called the lawyer back. He was hesitant, obviously worried about client confidentiality and legal pushback, but Natalie played the CEO card, the survivor card, the I have an entire legal team waiting card, and eventually he caved sort of. The accounts were accessed twice after Sarah Jennings's death, he admitted. Once from Ocean View City, once from Europe. But the IP addresses were masked. We're still trying to trace them. Did Sarah ever know about these accounts? I asked. Was her name actually involved? No official records tie her to them, he said, which is exactly why it stood out. It looks like someone used her name because it would pass under the radar, unsearchable, unlinked, and deeply buried. Natalie leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. So someone else could have been helping him. Or using her name as a shield. I sat there silently, fighting the bile crawling up my throat. The idea that Richard hadn't acted alone was one thing. The idea that someone else knew what happened to Sarah and used her name for cover, that made my skin crawl. Let's dig, I said finally. Harder than we ever have. The next few days were a blur of file requests, encrypted emails, burner phones, and tracking dead-end paper trails. Natalie pulled in private investigators, digital forensic analysts, even an ex-CIA friend she'd met during a corporate security conference. And slowly, the pieces started clicking together. Richard had been funneling money into a private research lab. Not medical research. Psychological. Behavioral testing. Underground programs with ties to experimental therapy, personality manipulation, even memory suppression. It sounded like sci-fi at first, but the records were legit. And the lab director? A woman named Dar. Elaine Carver. A name I recognized instantly. She taught at my university, I said. Guest lecturer. She had this creepy fixation with control theory and trauma recovery. Always said the best way to heal the mind was to erase what broke it. You think she was involved? Natalie asked. She always talked about human guinea pigs like they were just numbers. If Richard funded her, he probably gave her people too. You think Sarah? Natalie didn't finish the sentence. I don't know, I said. But I'm done wondering. We found her office. It was hidden behind 3 fake shell companies in a rundown building just outside the Ocean View industrial zone. I watched from the car as Natalie walked up the steps with a confidence I could never fake. I followed behind, heart pounding, one hand inside my coat where I kept pepper spray and a tiny voice recorder just in case. The receptionist barely looked up. You have an appointment? We're not patients, Natalie said smoothly. We're investigators. From where? Blake Enterprises. That got her attention. She stood slowly, eyes narrowing. What do you want? Dar. Carver. She's not here. Then maybe you'll pass on a message. Natalie stepped closer, dropped a file onto the desk. It contained copies of every document we'd gathered: bank trails, name forgeries, shell payments. Tell her the house of cards is collapsing. And this time, the roof's coming down on everyone involved. We left without another word, but I could feel the tremor ripple through the building as we walked away. That night, Natalie and I sat on the roof of her downtown condo, wrapped in blankets and silent worry. If she was involved, I said, if she helped him, we need someone from the inside. We don't know anyone, she said. But maybe someone out there does. That's when I remembered. There had been another woman. At Richard's last party, she hovered near the edges, flinching whenever he got too close. I didn't think much of it then, but now, her expression haunted me. I found her through social media. Maya Hart, former graduate student, now completely off-grid. No LinkedIn, no current address. But I remembered her face. And I remembered fear. Natalie and I tracked her to a halfway house 2 towns over. She was reluctant to talk at first, but once Natalie showed her the evidence, the dam cracked. He promised me a publishing deal, Maya said. Said I had talent. He gave me editing jobs, mentorship, introduced me to Carver, and then they started asking me to volunteer for cognitive studies. Did you ever see Sarah Jennings? I asked. Once, Maya whispered. She came to confront him. Said she found out about something. He looked so calm, but after she left he snapped. 2 days later, she was gone. Did you tell anyone? I tried, she said. But the cops didn't care. I was just another unstable ex-student. And Carver, she knew how to erase people without touching them. Natalie reached across the table and held Maya's hand. We believe you. And we're going to stop them. Over the next few days, Maya gave us everything: old emails, voice memos, even a blurry security cam shot showing Carver entering the back of Richard's estate days before Sarah's death. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was damn close. Natalie took it all to her lawyer. They built a case so airtight you could feel it hum with pressure. When the indictment dropped, it named not just Richard, but Dr. Carver and 2 former board members of Blake Enterprises as co-conspirators in a web of crimes ranging from fraud to obstruction to abuse of human subjects. The news blew up bigger than before. And this time, people didn't just want blood. They wanted answers. Natalie gave them. In another press conference, she stood before the world and said, "Justice isn't a straight line. It's a fight. A relentless, exhausting, personal fight. And we're not done." Afterward, I pulled her aside. "You realize you just painted a target on your back? I've had one since the day I was born," she said. "Might as well use it for something that matters." That night, for the first time since I met her, I saw Natalie cry, not because she was afraid, or angry, or exhausted, but because she finally felt seen. We held each other in the quiet aftermath, no words left, just the shared weight of grief and hope pressed between us like a heartbeat. And as I closed my eyes, I knew part 6 wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about what came after. The night before Dr. Carver's trial began, Natalie and I found ourselves back at the beach near Seaview Bay, the same spot where I'd once pulled her half-conscious body from the surf, the same shore where our lie of a marriage had begun, the place that had quietly carried the weight of both our lives without ever asking for thanks or apology, only patience. The wind was calmer than I remembered, the waves less angry, but maybe that was just my brain letting go of the trauma we'd carried here. Maybe it was finally letting us remember the sea not as a place of rescue or regret but of return. Natalie stood barefoot in the sand, her long coat flapping behind her, hair pulled back in that no-nonsense way she always defaulted to when she had something big on her mind. I watched her from a few steps away, the dull gold of the rising sun painting her silhouette like it was always meant to be here. "What are you thinking?" I asked, my voice barely louder than the waves. "I'm thinking," she said slowly, "that I survived everything that tried to kill me, and I'm still not sure if I know how to live now." I walked up beside her, close enough that our arms brushed, but not close enough to invade her silence. "You don't have to know right away," I said. "Living isn't some switch you flip once the danger's over. Sometimes it's just choosing not to run." She looked at me then, the faintest hint of a smile on her lips. "You always did have a way of sounding wiser than you are." "It's all an illusion," I smirked. "I'm still the guy who thought duct taping a hole in a kayak was a genius move. You almost drowned us. But we survived," I shrugged. And I learned a valuable lesson about trusting brand promises. Natalie snorted softly, then fell quiet again. Tomorrow they'll drag everything out against Sarah's name, Richard's actions, my family's shame, your grief, it'll all be public again. And I keep wondering, when does it stop? When do we finally get to shut the door and move forward without ghosts clawing at the windows? I turned to her fully. It stops when we decide it does. When we choose to stop letting the past define us. We don't owe it any more pain, Natalie. We gave it years. Now maybe it's time to just start building something that isn't shaped like loss. She closed her eyes for a moment, then leaned her head against my shoulder. And what does that look like to you? You. Me. Maybe a house that doesn't leak. A dog. A kitchen we never use but brag about anyway. And weekends where the only headline that matters is how we finally beat each other at Scrabble. You hate Scrabble. But I love beating you at things, I teased, and she nudged me playfully. I want that too, she murmured. God, I want that more than anything. The next morning was chaos in a tailored suit. Cameras. Reporters. Crowds spilling down courthouse steps. Protest signs. Security everywhere. But Natalie walked through it all like the eye of a storm-centered, calm, unshakable. I followed close behind, the weight of what this day meant pressing hard against my chest. Inside, the courtroom was cold and sterile, all marble and metal and old wood pretending to be justice. Dar. Carver sat at the defendant's table in a gray pantsuit, hair twisted into an impeccable knot, her expression blank. She didn't even glance our way. The prosecutor laid out the charges in meticulous detail: conspiracy, obstruction of justice, fraud, unethical experimentation, psychological manipulation, falsifying records, accessory to murder. Maya testified first. Her voice shook but didn't break. She told them everything: how Carver recruited her, threatened her, controlled her. How Sarah tried to stop it. How no one listened. And then it was my turn. I stood up and told them who Sarah was. Not as a victim. Not as a statistic. But as a person. As the woman who taught me what kindness looked like. Who saved me when the world had written me off. Who deserved a future she never got. And when I looked into the jury's eyes, I didn't see skepticism, I saw rage. Compassion. I saw people who believed us. Who felt it. Natalie was the final witness. She didn't cry. She didn't grandstand. She simply told the truth about the yacht, the corruption, the trauma, the systemic failure. And then she looked directly at Dr. Carver and asked, how many others? Carver didn't answer. But I saw something crack in her face. Guilt? Regret? Fear? Maybe all three. Maybe none. Either way, the verdict came faster than anyone expected. Guilty. On all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for the following month, but the judge denied bail. Carver was escorted out in cuffs, and as she passed us, she finally looked at me. You think this changes anything? She hissed. You think the rot ends with me? No, I said, steady. But it starts with you. And that's good enough for now. Outside the courthouse, Natalie and I stood side by side as reporters shouted questions. What's next for the Blake family? Do you plan to sue for damages? Are you and Mr. Reed officially engaged? Natalie held up her hand. No statements today, she said. Only one thing: I want to say thank you. To every woman who spoke up. To every victim who refused to stay silent. This victory isn't mine. It's ours. We got in the car and drove away in silence. No music. No words. Just the weight of a war ending and a life finally beginning. A week later, Natalie stood in front of the Blake Enterprises board of directors and officially stepped down as CEO. "It's time to build something of my own," she told them. "Something not stained by blood and silence." They offered her every possible position to stay. She declined them all. I found her later that evening sitting on the edge of the same golf course where she once taught me how to swing a club and pretended not to watch my form just to tease me. "So what now?" I asked, dropping beside her. She smiled. "We go home." "Where's home?" "Wherever you are." We moved out of the city a month later. Bought a small house in a quiet coastal town, one with creaky floors and too many windows and a backyard big enough for a dog we hadn't picked out yet. I opened a modest counseling practice nearby. Natalie started writing essays, short stories, one brutal, beautiful memoir she never showed anyone but me. And sometimes, late at night, we'd sit under the stars on the back porch, her legs over my lap, her head on my chest, and talk about everything we'd survived like it was some story we barely recognized anymore. We never had a big wedding. Just a courthouse, a few witnesses, 2 matching rings, and the knowledge that everything we'd built was earned, not inherited. One evening, we returned to Sarah's old house. We'd donated most of her things, but kept the photo, the one of her and me on that graduation day. We framed it and placed it by the window where the sea breeze still slipped in. Natalie lit a candle and whispered, "Thank you." And I finally whispered back, "You can rest now. Life after pain isn't loud. It's not grand. It's not a parade of perfect moments. It's the quiet laughter while folding laundry. It's grocery shopping with someone who knows your favorite cereal. It's fighting over takeout menus and falling asleep during movies you've both seen 10 times. And for me, it's the way Natalie still touches my hand like she's afraid I'll vanish. It's the way she says my name like it means safety. It's the way we serve Avedno, chose to live even when we had every reason not to. So here's my truth, I was never supposed to matter. I was a ghost, a lie, a nobody with a borrowed name and a broken past. But love didn't care. Natalie didn't care. And because of that, I get to wake up every morning with the woman I almost lost, in a world we carved out from the wreckage, not perfect, not painless, but ours. All of it. And that, I think, is the real miracle.